Oil painting without solvents? Yes, you can. Hello, welcome back to part 2 of how I oil paint around my kids, all about painting solvent-free. I paint solvent-free because I have kids in my studio space, but it's also a good idea for any artist out there who just doesn't have adequate ventilation in their studio. Okay, so for painting solvent-free, all you need is oil paint straight out of the tubes and some oil. This is walnut oil. You could also use linseed oil. This is just what I happen to have. So let's say that I made this brown color and I want to sort of clean my brush in order to make a new color. All I'm going to do, let's say I want to do something that I don't want any brown in it, I am going to wipe off as much of that paint as I can. Put a drop or two of the oil on the palette and swish my brush around in it. And do it again. Now it's starting to get pretty clean. Now I'm going to make a different color. Let's say a green. And there you go. Now if I wanted to make this color here, this brown, a bit more liquid in order to easier way of applying it to the canvas, I can just use some of this oil that I already dipped my brush into that's already tinted brown to thin that paint. And over here, if I want to thin this one, just put another drop of oil. And there you go. Here's the painting I'm working on this week. It looks so much better from farther away. One of those paintings. But anyway, so this one I'm painting in layers. And the key to me to working in layers is keeping the fat over lean rule. And so what I did is I just painted this first layer with paint straight out of the tube. And to do that, I use a pretty stiff brush, like a hog hair brush or hog synthetic brush works good too. And that way it's just easier to apply the paint when it's really thick straight out of the tube. So for the next layer, I'm going to add in a little bit of my walnut oil and thin the paint down so that it's easier to apply. It just flows a lot better. If I were doing this a la prima or wet and wet, I would have just added in the walnut oil from the get-go for easier application. Okay, so let's say it's the end of a painting session and I don't want to wash my brush, I just want to save it for the next day. So all I'm gonna do, and it's so easy, I'm just gonna wipe off the excess paint. Dip my brush into the oil, set it flat, and it will stay good until the next time, up to a few days. I've heard of people adding like a 2% addition of clove oil into the oil jar, which will keep it good longer, but I haven't felt the need to use that yet. And then the next day, all I do when I want to use my brush is wipe it off, and it's ready to go. When it's time to clean my brushes, I use this stuff, Terpenoid Natural. It's supposed to be completely non-toxic and non-flammable. So what I do is I pour a little bit into an old jar, and depending on how long it's been since I last cleaned my brushes, I might just leave them sit for a couple of hours just to make sure that all of that older paint is dissolved. This stuff is kind of amazing. I've actually let it sit on dried up old palettes or old brushes that I forgot to clean and maybe they rolled under my art cart, and I found them later, and I have to let it sit for a couple days sometimes, but it always gets the paint out. It's amazing. So you just want to be careful with your softer, maybe synthetic brushes. You know, something like this I would not leave soak for very long because you'll end up with bent bristles, and that's no fun. Okay, now to actually clean my brush, I'm just going to take this out, and I'm still going to work this around and try and get off as much of the oil paint as I can so it's just not going down the drain. And I might dip it again, work it around. Now I could just rinse it and let it be, but I feel like sometimes that Terpenoid Natural leaves a little bit of a residue behind, so I also follow it up with the Masters Brush Cleaner and Preserver. So I'm going to get it wet, work it around in here. As you can see, there's still some color coming off. So I'll work it around on the brush. Not seeing too much color coming off anymore. So I would call that pretty clean. The cool thing about this stuff is you can dip your brush in it and help shape it and just let it dry, just like that. Then I always lay my brushes flat to dry. That's to prevent moisture from entering the base of the brush, which could potentially ruin it over time. I only store my brushes in an upright position when they're completely dry. And that's how I paint without solvents. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below.